Ask John Live. We have a very special episode for all of you joining us here in person and all of you joining us virtually via YouTube. We are here live at the Center for Languages and Cultural Career Week, and I am very, very grateful and fortunate to be joined here by my guest, Mr. Christopher Magriney. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Hey, John. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for letting us get the message out about learning language.
Yes, thank you. I want to start this interview, as I start all of my podcast interviews for Ask John, with that initial question that will be asked to every student they are ever in with an interview of, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, my name's Chris Magriney. I'm a Chinese language teacher at USC. I've been here for 16 years. Usually when people look at me, they're surprised when I tell them what my occupation is, because I don't look like your typical Chinese language teacher. And they always want to know why this is something that I pursued as a career. And usually what I tell them is I spent many, many years living in Taiwan. And once I moved from Taiwan back to America, I was living in Hawaii. And I sort of had retired by that point, and I wanted to be a beach bum. And there's only so much surfing and eating poi and eating pineapple you can do. And after about a year, I discovered that in Hawaii, the University of Hawaii at Manoa, they have an incredible Chinese language program for teaching Chinese as a foreign language. So I decided to take a class. And the more classes I took, the more I got interested in it. The more I got interested in it, I decided to pursue it as a career. When I was done with my degree, I was almost ready to move back to Taiwan. And all my classmates said, you should apply for jobs in the mainland. So I thought, okay, let's apply for jobs in the mainland. And luckily, I got a job at USC, and it's now 16 years on.
Wonderful. And I love, thank you for bringing up kind of that winding path almost. It wasn't the initial destination. And that's something that I really want our listeners and everyone here to realize, is that it's okay to kind of take a path, and maybe the initial plan you have at the beginning when you graduate from your undergrad, it might not be where you end up, and that's okay.
And I completely agree with that. My path has been nothing but winding. I didn't start my graduate degree and start teaching Chinese till I was in my 40s. And before then, I was working and living in Taiwan, and everything I did in Taiwan, and when I was in Taiwan, I went to college and I studied mathematics. From a mathematics degree, I graduated, well, I didn't graduate, I finished 3 years, and at the third year I decided I'm going to start a business with my friend, and we did publishing. And I did publishing for many years, and I did education in Taiwan for many years, and then that led to Hawaii, that eventually led me to here. So the path has been very windy and roundabout.
Yeah. And that's a great kind of thing as well, is take those chances.
Yeah.
Maybe start a business, try it out.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, that's great experiences for the future that you can kind of lend them forward. Absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree.
In your opinion, what is the greatest or largest advantages for students adding additional languages to their repertoire?
I'm gonna probably go to like a metaphor, and I don't know how else to do it.
Yeah.
Like, you get asked this a lot when you're a language teacher, and one of the things I always go back to is, I think, like, when we talk about exercise, no one ever regrets a workout. No one ever regrets starting an exercise regime. And I think, or regimen, I guess I should say, a regiment. And I think learning a language is similar in that no one regrets learning a language. It takes your worldview, your perspective, and widens it to include things that you never would have been able to conceive of before studying it. It allows you to be able to communicate with people who you would not have been able to directly talk to without like the aid of a translator or a translation or interpretation. So I think there's just really no reason not to study a foreign language. This is just something that's going to make your world better. There's a really famous translator or someone who studies a famous kind of novel in the Chinese language world, and the novels are by Jin Yong, and he is a writer of martial art novels, probably the most famous in the modern era. And the people that have translated Jin Yong, one of the things they talk about is, if you read translations of Jin Yong, it's like looking out through a window. So you get contact, you have things you can see, but there's a gap between you and what Jin Yong was saying as a writer. And there's a limit to your perspective because you're only looking through the window. So there's only so much you can see. But if you read him in Chinese, you get to experience the whole world he created. And I think that's what people should realize when they take on the tough task of learning foreign languages. You're broadening your perspective. You're able to now engage with a much wider world. And there's just, in this day and age, there's no reason not to do something like that.
Absolutely. It's in kind of taking it from a career perspective, widening your views, including other perspectives, can do nothing but help you.
Yeah.
I've never encountered an experience where adding additional knowledge doesn't help you in a career situation. My kind of tagline, I would say, for Ask John and any student that I meet with is, information is the currency of careers. Do you feel like adding languages adds information to people's lives?
Yeah, when you think about it, your understanding of the world, if you're only an English speaker, is limited to any information that's available to you in English. And it's great being an English speaker. You know, I'm very happy that I'm a native speaker of English because the English is a global language and it's all around the world. But nonetheless, there are whole sections of the world with information that is valuable to us as Americans that you don't have access to if you don't speak the language, or you have limited access to via translation. So you're going to get so much more information that you're going to be able to incorporate into doing your job. I always go back to myself as an example.
Yeah.
So one of the jobs I did when I was living and working in Taiwan is I would source businesses in China for Western corporations. And one time we were sourcing for a German company. And the big shot from Germany was ready to come over and sign a deal. And after you sign a deal, you take people out to go for drinking and like singing and like having lots of fun. And we were at a sushi restaurant in Beijing. And the waitress that was serving us, by accident, spilt some beverage on the German guy. And the German guy just exploded. And the reason he exploded is the waitress, in order to show that she was embarrassed what happened, put her hand up and sort of which was a very natural reaction for someone to do in China. But I think to the German guy, he felt he was being laughed at.
Yeah.
And it was very important for me in that situation to be able to say, hey, you know, there's no reason to lose your cool. This is what people do at that time. So any information you have culturally or linguistically will just be able to allow you to do more things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Yeah, and that's a critical thing when adding careers is expansion, expansion, gain more experiences. So in gaining kind of more experiences or adding languages, kind of this topic we're talking about, how do you feel like students can maximize these language abilities on a resume or in an interview? How do they bring it up in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I really thought about that. I think when you are talking to someone about your language skills, you want to be honest about what you can do. And I think when we're learning a foreign language, a lot of people think of foreign language as the accruing vocabulary and grammar, and that is fundamentally what it does. But you're also learning to do very specific tasks. Can you negotiate in the language? Can you ask for your desires and wants to be satisfied? And I think when we're talking about what we can do with a foreign language, that's when we're be able to explain to people like, oh, I'm at an advanced level, and at an advanced level, I can be able to interview someone.
Yeah.
So like right now we're functioning at an advanced level. You're asking me questions and I'm responding about experiences I've had and my opinions about things.
Yeah.
And I think that's one way, especially in an interview, you can let people know is what can you do concretely with the language? What can you specifically, goals can you specifically achieve? Because if you let people know that, then they'll be able to know how they can use your language skills. I think sometimes, like for Americans at least, it's I can speak a language, and I can speak a language maybe they might say fluently, but for people that are in the field, we don't use terms like that because I don't know what it means to I can speak a language. I don't know what it means to I can speak a language fluently. But if you tell me you can negotiate the price on a new product, well, that's something you can do for us if I'm trying to hire you to do that as part of your job.
Yeah. So bring up the tangible results, tangible skills that you can do. I can negotiate. I can resolve conflicts. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think anything tangible that you can do for a company makes you a better candidate for a job or a career. And I think at least what we're doing when we're teaching Chinese at USC is we're very specific about what our students can and cannot do, and we're just trying to expand from a little bubble around the self where you can say like, me, and you're just talking about yourself, to talking about your society at large, and then to be able to interact in every level of society to be able to accomplish any task you need to do.
So as you're teaching students, what recommendations would you have for our audience on taking it from kind of that classroom level, probably a little bit more academic, a little bit more strict, into kind of the workforce? What kind of tips and tricks would you have? Using slang, don't use slang?
Yeah.
Like how do we apply it to the real world?
Use slang sparingly, because if it's your non-native language, you're probably using it wrong, and it could be very insulting to people. I've learned that the hard way. So like, you want to say what you want to be able to communicate in a way that you're able to accomplish what you need to be able to do.
Yeah.
But really, what students need to do is they need to invest some time into learning, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It could be learning a new word every day. It could be talking to someone and asking them a question and getting the answer so that you can understand it and be able to communicate in that regard. But I think language is, like, I go back to my metaphor with exercise, it's something you need to do daily. It's something you need to work out your brain so that your brain and the connections in your brain are constantly coming together, and there's new connections and you're learning new things. I think of learning language as, I use the term critical mass. There's a point where you're learning, and then it's like you hit critical mass and it explodes, and just everything can come out then. And by that point, you basically can communicate in almost any situation. Is it perfect? No. I'm a non-native speaker of Chinese. It's not perfect, but it's good enough that I can get the job done that I need to do.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice even for when you're speaking in your native language, whether that's your native language is English, Chinese, whatever it might be, is it's okay to maybe make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. And when you're learning kind of these new languages, understand that you're not even perfect in your own language. So if you make mistakes, that's okay.
For one of my jobs in Taiwan, I was transcribing what reporters on CNN were saying in order to turn it into teaching materials. And within a day, we realized, oh my, when someone is talking off the cuff, even as a native speaker, they say things that just don't make sense. And no doubt, if you wrote down exactly what I'm saying now, it's the same. It's fine to make a mistake. In fact, I sort of glory in the mistakes, because when I make a mistake, I learn how to say it right eventually. And being aware of what was wrong gives you the ability to finally fix it. My favorite kind of person to talk to when I was learning Chinese is kids, because they don't have an effective filter. So when you say something wrong, they stare at you like, and you know right away. Adults are too nice. Adults are kind. And then when you're a Chinese professor like me, they're way too kind. Because if I say something wrong, everyone is, in Chinese it's called 不好意思. They're embarrassed to like tell me I'm wrong just because of my job. So like, be happy when you make a mistake. You're gonna learn from it and eventually be able to improve.
And thank you for bringing up that be happy when you make a mistake. That's not just a language lesson, that's a life lesson of don't be afraid to make mistakes. Especially something I talk about a lot with my students is when you're getting into an internship, when you're getting into a job, I don't advocate for you to get into a situation that you knowingly are going to hate. It's going to be toxic, it's going to be bad for you. But take chances, because you never know. Maybe you want to start out as a business owner in Taiwan. Maybe you just want to be a beach bum in Hawaii. But until you take the chance of being a Chinese professor, oh, this is the good thing. Or it could have gone the other way and been like, oh no, this is no good.
And everyone has imposter syndrome. The first time I walked into a classroom to teach Chinese was in Hawaii, and everyone except for me was Asian, and everyone except for me was Chinese. And I must admit, as a white man walking into a classroom telling people how to speak a language of their ancestors, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. But you eventually get over it. The more you do it, the more you practice it, you eventually feel like, no, this is the right place for me to be, and this is the right place for me to develop as a person.
How did you get over that imposter syndrome? Do you just do it? What was your method?
That's how I did it. I just did it. One of the things I really liked is my students in Hawaii especially I think the Asian American students felt very comfortable with me teaching them because they felt like, if this guy can do it, I can do it. Okay, so it was like a way for them to like, and they took that energy and they made it flow back to me. So I felt really positive, like in the classroom. And I must admit, for me, it didn't last too long. Okay. You know, because like I felt like, oh, these are people giving me good vibes, and I'm giving them good vibes, and we're, you know, a really good learning environment. And
you were probably pretty good at your job.
I hope so. I try.
You have to be. You've been here for 16 years. You have to be good at it. Yeah. So when students are starting out maybe in your classes and they start with kind of that proficient, they're okay at the language, what are tangible steps somebody can take to go from proficient to workability, being able to use it in a workplace? For any language, but especially Chinese.
Yeah, no, for any language, it's study abroad. I think what we do in the classroom in America is we create scaffolding for you. So it's extremely bare bones, but those bare bones allow you to be able to put the meat on them when you're like abroad and in the environment. But to be honest, if studying abroad is something that is, you know, for whatever reason, not something that's attainable for you, if you put yourself in an environment where you have to use the language to accomplish something, you will eventually grow from that, and you will be able to fill yourself out. For me, I did that in Taiwan when I went to college. Before I went to college, I was solid at everyday stuff. I could communicate with people and I could get stuff done. But being in an environment like college where basically it was demanded of me that I needed to read and write and communicate, there were 60,000 classmates of mine and no one spoke English very, very fluently. So like if I wanted to communicate at all, I needed to be able to communicate in Chinese. And you know, you have to put the time in too. For me, the first 3 years of college, I thought by the time I was at my third year, I'm like, you know, I'm on track. I'm able to communicate. And one day at lunch, I was sitting with like my crew of like 5 people, and I said something, and one of them turned to me and he said, "You can finally communicate. Like you can finally speak." And I just looked at him and I'm like, what have I been doing for 3 years? And he goes, "You just made no sense. Like you just like we just sort of like tolerated you, like you were like the class pet." And he goes, "But now like you sound right. Like what you're saying makes sense." And like I'm glad that I was able to push through that because it allowed me to get to the skills I needed to be able to like do business or communicate like in almost any situation. Yeah,
I really like the word you keep using, which is communicate. That's what something a lot of students, they say, I can speak the language, but can you communicate? What's the difference between speaking it and communicating?
This is one of the things that's hard for us as teachers because I think a lot of our students think that speaking the language is communicating, but speaking the language means you can generate sounds out of your mouth and it's in a way that someone can understand. It's whether or not I can say something to someone properly in a way that they comprehend, and then they can put something back to me that is following what I just said, and then it's this to and fro with another human being. This is what we want to achieve. Just being able to say a sentence, it's the start, but it's the very, very basic, and you want to be able to have a conversation with someone, you want to be able to get information from them, you want to be able to achieve something like a goal that they're setting for you and things like that.
Absolutely. And that's fantastic career advice in general of when you're meeting with clients, when you're meeting with your boss or whoever it might be, is don't just speak at them. Communicate with them. You have to be sharing ideas and receiving those ideas and coming up with problem solving and working together.
Yeah, I think a lot of us sort of lost that during COVID.
Yes.
We were like talking into a screen and we were being talked to from a screen, and we need to get back to where like we're looking at people, we're talking to people, and we're communicating. And I think language is one way to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So specifically with Chinese or other Asian languages, how do you see kind of the market? Again, I'm kind of that career lens focus. How do you see the market growing or changing?
The US and China's economies are so intertwined that there is just no way that any Chinese language skills you obtain will not be useful to you in the future. Just because regardless of what happens between the relationship between the two countries, there's going to need to be contact between the two, whether it be friendly or not quite as friendly. But people need to be able to communicate, and it's very important for people in the United States to have those language skills. Like I said previously, you want to be able to directly engage with people. You do not want to have to go through the medium of translation.
Why?
Because when you're going through the medium translation, your perspective is limited. It's what the translator is telling you. You don't know if what the translator is telling you, how accurate it is. If you know anything about translation, is some people can do it really well, but some people don't do it very well. And if you're the person who doesn't speak the language at all, you have no idea how to judge that. And you want to be able to directly communicate. You want to be able to go back and forth with someone so that we can all understand each other better.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Those are kind of the questions that I have for you right now. So we want to open it up to our guests in the room, the audience here. What sort of questions do you have, whether about classes or taking it into the careers? What questions do you have, if any?
Would you have any advice for a student who maybe is able to take like an intro course in the language but doesn't have the schedule room to take more advanced? Like what's the best way to maintain or like add on to your language ability?
What's really great about today is there is so much information online in order to help you be able to learn language on your own. So I think like you said, it's great to take an intro level class just because sometimes it's sort of nice to have someone guide you at the very first. But once you don't have time in your schedule to take more language classes, like formal language classes, there are innumerable apps, there are websites, there's straight up information where everything is so connected that you can work with that to make progress. And like I said previously, even if you're only progressing like at a word a day or a phrase a day, it's still something more. And it might be very bare bones, but someday you'll have an opportunity to be able to immerse yourself in the language better, and that will fill out. Or you'll have a job where a very specific skill will be necessary and you can learn that skill. And then you have that skill, you have enough bare bones that you can pick up that skill and then be able to communicate in the language.
Real quick, I want to jump on that question if I may, and then we have another question. I want to get to you, absolutely. Do you have any recommendations on where people should go for that kind of online learning? Is it just YouTube? Is it specific websites?
YouTube has an amazing amount of content on it. Of like, I like YouTube Shorts, and there are people that come up on YouTube Shorts where they know Chinese and they know English, and they'll like teach you a phrase. And usually they want to attract viewers, so it's usually very engaging content. Like I even watch that stuff. I watch that stuff almost every day. I find it amazing. There are specific apps for learning language. I don't have a recommendation for anyone specifically, but I always feel any contact you have will help you improve. So literally you just pick up an app and start using it, and then hopefully it's free. Like there's no reason to pay until you like know exactly what you want. And you can have a free app and just play around with it and like learn from it. And then once you're done with that, you just move on to another app.
Thank you. Yes.
With such limited free time day to day, I am still wanting to improve my current language skills in one language while also wanting to start learning another language. Do you have any advice on how to split that limited free time?
Yeah.
And which would be more practical, perhaps?
I totally understand this situation.
I'm struggling through learning Spanish. I live in East LA, and I just find it like I have to learn Spanish. Like it's just silly of me not to speak Spanish living in East LA. All my neighbors are Spanish speakers. Every store I go to is Spanish speaking. And whenever I force someone to have to communicate in English, I think the one good thing about learning multiple foreign languages is every new language gets easier. So if you've ever seen people who are truly multilingual, like trilingual, quadlingual, pentalingual, I'm not quite sure how that's said, one of the things I've always found is by the time they get to like the second language, the third, the fourth, their brain is so hardwired to be able to absorb this stuff that it goes in much more easier. So that is just to be able to have that ability is something that everyone should pursue. The one thing you have to watch out for is the part of our brain that processes foreign language is a specific part of the brain. It's separate from our native part of the brain, so that once more languages get in here, it's sometimes very easy to mess them up. So like sometimes like I'll if I was learning Spanish and I had previously learned French and like I would just mix them up. And I think again, like be willing to make mistakes, but if you can invest even if it's just a few minutes each day, you will progress, and like it's just something you should do.
Yes.
So you mentioned about studying abroad. I'm wondering if students don't have opportunity to study abroad or that return from studying abroad and want to maintain their proficiency and maybe or prepare their future career using Chinese. Do you have any advice for these students?
I have lots of advice, especially, this is a great question coming from my boss. Hi, Angela. There are many, many ways to improve your Chinese and to maintain your Chinese. For example, we have an internship class, and the internship class is a great way to have an opportunity that while you're in LA, to be able to be working in a Chinese language environment. So I think if students aren't able to pursue further Chinese language classes, the internship class would be a great class because you do an internship, we help you set up an internship, and that's basically what you do throughout the entire semester. In addition to that, we have a language exchange program at USC. We have many international students at USC. Chinese alone are usually about 8,000 each academic year, people coming from the Chinese language speaking world. And we encourage our students to sign up for our language exchange program and to have a language partner, because it's a great way to help someone accustomize to be living in the United States while at the same time improving your Chinese language skills.
Thank you.
Yeah. That good, boss? Okay, good.
Well done.
Okay.
Any other questions? Even if you've already asked one, you can ask a second one if you think of something. That is allowed.
So John, do you speak any foreign languages?
I do. I served a 2-year religious volunteer. It was called a mission. I can't think of a different word on it in the high stress of cameras. In the Marshall Islands, which is, if you don't know where the Marshall Islands is, it is if Hawaii's here and Australia's down here, it's right in the middle of the two. A lot of battles during World War II in the Pacific Theater were fought in that region. And so in my 2 years there, I learned Marshallese. I was able to speak, communicate. I would like to think I was able to, but I'm not really the person to ask. I guess it was the people I was talking to. But it was amazing. And I have kept up with it a little bit, but not as much as I probably should, because I don't have kind of those opportunities. It's not as spread abroad as Chinese and not quite as useful.
I'm certain you're being modest though, because I've found that people who've gone on missions, the language education is just amazing.
Yeah.
I would meet people on missions in Taiwan, and they were able to communicate in Taiwanese and Mandarin at an extremely high level of proficiency.
It is definitely a kind of a trial by fire, and I recommend it for students, not necessarily the religious side of things. I won't talk about that, but the studying abroad, where I was sent from the United States, and I was sent to an outer island, and the procedure was, you are now going to communicate or die. Like, it wasn't that dire, but the first place I was sent to, basically nobody spoke English at all, and so I had to learn very, very quickly. If I was going to say anything to anyone, I had to do it in their language. I had to do it I had to grasp their cultures and communicate. And it went from knowing absolutely nothing, I had never heard of the language of Marshallese, to about 2 or 3 months I could understand pretty well. In 6 months I was okay. People weren't laughing at me anymore.
Wow.
And by under a year, people stopped laughing and would actually answer my questions.
There's a reason we say sink or swim. Sometimes putting yourself in difficult situations like that is truly a way to blossom and really be able to learn to communicate, especially when we're talking in terms of foreign language.
Absolutely, and it's great career advice too
Yeah.
of put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're going to be able to sink or swim until you're there, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's okay. It's okay to not be comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Thank you for thank you for asking. I never get to talk about my Marshallese, but I love it.
It's what I do for a living. Getting people to talk. Just like you. You do it for interviews, I do it in the classroom.
Absolutely. And I've experienced with kind of these learning a second language is it really helps me problem solve. It gets my brain working. You said it earlier, it expands my view and made me much more accepting, much more tolerant. I felt like I was a pretty tolerant person before, but being in a different culture and learning their language and learning how they communicate, it changes things, and it makes you in my opinion, a better person, a better human.
I completely agree with that. You have to be able to laugh at yourself, especially when you're first learning a language. You just need to be able to laugh and enjoy it, and just work through the process, because you'll eventually get to where you need to be.
Absolutely.
But I had many a situation where I would misspeak.
Yeah.
And, again, you learn from the mistake and then you move on.
Absolutely. We are sadly coming to the end of our time together. I have a couple of final questions for you. One of the penultimate question is, do you have any final words of wisdom to impart to our audience or to our listeners, whether it's career advice, whether it's language advice, whether it's just advice from you, Chris?
I don't know if I have any words of wisdom, but learn a foreign language. I'll just make it simple. Learn a foreign language.
Wonderful.
Especially if you're at USC, learn a foreign language, especially Chinese.
Thank you, Chris, for joining us today on Ask John. Is there anything you would like to plug? That is my true last question for you. Anything to plug?
Sure. In our East Asian languages and cultures department, and our Chinese program, we have many things we'd like to plug. We have a study abroad. Why not?
Yeah.
We have a study abroad program in the next year, 2026. We will be going to Taiwan or Beijing. So if you're interested in studying abroad in Taiwan or Beijing, definitely contact our department and our program and get more information. Like I mentioned, there is a language exchange program where we try to link up people who are native speakers or near native speakers of a language with students who are learning at USC. We do it for all 16 languages that are taught at USC. So please sign up for that. You can get more information at the Center for Languages and Cultures website. I apologize, the name has changed recently and I always forget.
You're just fine.
What else do I want to plug? In our Chinese language program, we have a new class, 109. It's for helping people to learn to read in Chinese. And we simply put you in a room and you read. So it's a very low stress, low stakes way to practice learning Chinese and learning to read in Chinese. That's also something I'd like to plug. Anything else? I think we're good? Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris, again.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for talking with me. Thank you to our audience here live.
Thank you, guys.
So grateful
Thank
that
you.
you were
Thank
able
you.
to
Thank
ask
you for the
questions.
question.
And thank you to those watching virtually. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And see you soon. to Ask John Live. We are here as a very special episode of Ask John here at the Center for Languages and Culture Career Week. And I have a very special guest here with me today, Dr. David Zarazúa. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Yes.
My Spanish is not as good as I would like it to be because I don't know Spanish. Hello, David, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
It's very exciting that we're promoting language learning.
Absolutely.
So I'm very happy to be here.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here. I want to start out our interview today as I start out all Ask John interview podcast episodes of asking that question that every student will ever be asked in an interview. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm originally from Mexico, from a big city near Texas. The name of the city is Monterrey. And the majority of my family is still there. And well, I went to school over there, to college too. And I studied English. I got a major in English in Mexico. It was very difficult. And after graduating, or right before I graduated, I still had not a picture of what I wanted to do. And a university in the United States, New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, the director of the languages program there, he went to visit my university in Mexico. And he went recruiting.
Yeah.
This university, New Mexico State University, has connections with different universities in Mexico. He came to our university, gave a presentation, and invited people to apply to their graduate program. I had no idea how the educational system in the US worked. I fill out a piece of paper, an application,
Yeah.
send it, and they accepted me. Yes. I had
Wow.
not told my
Yeah.
parents yet at that point in time. So when I was accepted, I told them, "Hey, I'm moving to the U.S." And they were happy about it.
Yeah.
They supported me, and I came, and I was there in Las Cruces for a couple of years. Very exciting. It was a very rewarding experience in the classroom and outside of the classrooms, and also professionally, because that was the first time that I started teaching for real.
Yeah.
And things worked out very well. I was able to, study linguistics, study literature that I like a lot too. And I was able also to get an assistantship in, they had an engineering program that they were developing language processing programs. And I was invited to participate. They were trying to, my function was to analyze speech.
Yeah.
And try to identify the little words that didn't have meaning, that didn't add meaning to the conversation.
Yes.
Like all those little words. That you, in principle, at least that program, what they wanted to do was eliminate all those elements.
Yeah.
To try to identify the ones that were contributing, the lexical elements that were contributing meaning to the text, to the dialogues, to try to translate those.
Yeah.
It was a very diverse experience on the activities that I was doing. It was a very practical application of the linguistics that I was learning in the classroom. It was very interesting. And then when I finished there, again, right before graduating, my advisor, he asked me, "Hey, what are your plans?" And I said, "I have no idea."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, why don't you study a Ph.D.?" So I'm like, "Well, I guess I can do that."
Yeah.
And I applied to different places, and I was accepted at USC, and I came to LA to study a Ph.D. in Spanish linguistics. And that was long time ago.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much my life story. I still have strong connections with my family in Mexico, but now I also have my family here in Los Angeles. And have been working most of the time at USC with some other endeavors outside of USC too.
Yeah. Something that thank you for sharing your story, first of all, and I also really want to highlight to our listeners here live in the audience and also online, is that a lot of the steps you were talking about, you went to your undergraduate and then it kind of just happened, it worked out to go to your master's program, it kind of worked out to your PhD program. Number one, it's okay not to have a plan. You're a very successful professor. You're here at USC, you're teaching at a high-level university,
Yes.
but you started without a plan. And that's okay. That sounds like a criticism,
Yes.
but
No, yes, and that's what I think about my students now, because
Yeah.
usually in my basic Spanish classes, I have students that are 17, some of
Yeah.
them 18, and my children are also about that age.
Yeah.
And I feel that right now there's a lot of pressure for students to decide on their careers, their lifetime careers, at least going into college.
yes.
And the truth is, at least in my case, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was just doing stuff that I liked, that was interesting to me, and that kept, pushing me forward. And yeah, it continues being a very interesting profession for me,
Yeah.
working in the classroom.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up, you just kept doing what you liked.
Yes.
That's the basis of careers. That's
Yes.
my job, is to
Yes.
help people figure out, what do you even like? What
Yeah.
are your interests? And it's okay to follow those. It's okay to sometimes do it for other reasons, but
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with interests.
No, yeah. It's just a rewarding element that I get to go home, and there's a couple of questions that student asked that day that push you through the day and I remember the questions, and they make me happy, so yeah, that's very useful
Yes.
in regular life.
Yes, and we will certainly dive into more kind of general career advice, but I also want to kind of talk about learning languages and learning Spanish and language learning. What do you feel like are the largest advantages of learning a second language, whether any second language really, or a third?
Oh yes. Well, the connection. To me, is the connections. The connections that you can make with people.
Okay.
They are facilitated. They are enhanced when a lot of people speak English.
Yep.
I speak English. I learned to speak English. But that ability that I have to connect with a larger variety of people, I could go to a room and we could all speak English, but then there might be some people in the audience who speak Spanish, and those connections, at least to me, feel sometimes better.
Yeah.
That you can speak in other language, even when the other people that I'm talking to is not a native speaker of Spanish. I feel that we can connect. Sometimes
Yeah.
that we can connect better.
Yes, absolutely.
And the same would apply, for instance, if I were traveling abroad somewhere where other language is the dominant language, and then I find somebody who speaks English,
Yeah.
and then I feel the connection with that person more easily. So it helps. It helps a lot in a personal level, these examples that I gave you, but also in a professional level, it's very useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to talk about that professional level. Kind of a specialty of yours is kind of that taking medical terminology and kind of translating, I don't know if translating is the right word, and you can correct me, into kind of Spanish. Talk to me a little bit about your work with kind of that
Yes.
medical language and into a different language.
So yes, again, just by chance, by chance.
Yeah.
I was a graduate student, and at that point in time, my girlfriend, who is my wife now, she was working at USC to the physician assistant program, and they had a little component on Spanish, on medical Spanish, and they needed somebody to teach it. And at that point in time, it worked out, and I taught it maybe one semester, maybe a couple of semesters, and things. Then I got busy with my PhD. And that's how the first time that I figured out that there is a need for that.
Yeah.
And I had to let it go for a while, and then things started happening. And it has happened more than once in which it has been students
Yeah.
who have contacted me personally to try to do something with medical Spanish. Yes,
is so cool.
it's been more than once. In fact, it may be the majority of my experiences with students in the field of medical Spanish. It's students who have some real life experience that make them realize
Yeah.
that they need medical Spanish. That first time I was working with KEC, with the School of Medicine,
Yes.
and it was two second-year students who had finished, and they were Spanish speakers. They had interactions in Spanish. They had seen patients in Spanish, and they were like, "We cannot believe that students are going through this program without medical Spanish," because that was their experience. So they got some funds together. We created a pilot program, and things just exploded from there for me regarding medical Spanish. Now I continue doing more and more with them, and then with other programs too. And it continues being the same thing, that students with personal experience come to me to try to do something together so that their experience gets better, so that they improve their Spanish before going to medical school and before seeing patients. So that's very rewarding. That's very different than just my regular language classes.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, the students in the medical Spanish classes, they are there because they know that they need to learn Spanish. And my students in regular language classes, they still don't know that.
Yeah.
The majority of them still don't know what their need is going to be, which is okay. But definitely, if anybody is interested in the field in healthcare, they, by my experience and the experience from the students that I have interacted in the past, they need to learn Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah. That ties perfectly into kind of my next kind of rogue question that I had out is, what have you found are the main differences between kind of that academic classroom language Spanish for you and quote unquote real world application of Spanish? How do those differ, and how can students in the classroom prepare for the other, and how can they relate?
I just got an email a couple of weeks ago from a student in my class who is very good, very proficient in my class.
Yeah.
And he was asking, what can I do to speak real Spanish with people outside?
Yeah.
In general, in our classes, we try to push students in that direction.
Yeah.
I have a metaphor with sports and my classes, and it is that the class is practice. The students need to prepare to come to practice and scrimmage.
Yeah.
They need to maybe go lift weights. They need to shoot, let's say basketball. They need to shoot the ball on their own, and then they come to practice to scrimmage.
Yeah.
But the real game is outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
So practice can be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
For instance, students in high school have a great time in practice, just like we do in Spanish classes.
Yeah.
But for the great majority of the students, the objective is to play the game, to play the real game, and the real game is outside of the class. We try in our classes to give a few of those experiences with some of the projects. We try to for the students to go outside of the classroom and do activities and projects. But at the end, it depends on them. Now, what's the difference? Well, it's just that in class, our Spanish is in control situations. The great majority of the interactions occur because I tell them to have those interactions, do those activities, etc. We tend to be, the students and we are patient with each other. There's more patience there. And because of all these reasons, yes, the Spanish that we use in class is clearer,
Yeah.
it's simpler, and yeah, we have a more positive attitude to each other in class. When you go outside of class, well, the speed of the language may increase.
Yes.
The vocabulary diversifies, and there's a lot less control of what's going on. You have to be very good controlling the interaction. You have to be very aware of what you can do in order to get out there. So if you're an intermediate speaker, you know that you're already asking questions, expressing a little bit about yourself, etc. When you go out there, you have to rely on asking questions.
Yes. Yes.
And you know, things get improved, you improve as a speaker, and then you can, you know, your participations get stronger, you get to lead a conversation as opposed to just asking questions, etc. So that's development. But yeah, at the end, the Spanish in the classroom is just practice for the real game that is out there. And yeah, the real game is more rewarding. You wanna play.
Yeah, you want to do the thing.
Yeah. So,
what recommendations would you have to students to get in the game, to play the game? How do they get in the game? What opportunities should they be looking for?
Well, first they have to be aware of what they can do.
Okay.
By looking at the stuff that they do in class. And we usually, the language courses here at USC, the Spanish one in particular too, we try to show them that this is what you can do.
Yeah.
And then you have to go and look for those opportunities outside.
Yeah.
You cannot shoot too high because then you're gonna crash and you might get disappointed.
Yeah.
And then you want maybe not continue with that.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of what you can do and try to look for opportunities like that.
Yeah.
And you're looking for something that is a little bit more advanced than what you can do. Just
Stretch
a little
yourself
bit more.
a little bit.
A stretch, yes, definitely. That's what I tell my students, that are already intermediate, advanced, like, you cannot maintain your language just by ordering food at a restaurant. You're already past that.
Yeah.
You have to engage the people who are at the restaurant about how the business is going, where are they from, how are their lives going, because like short interactions are not gonna do for you.
Yeah.
You have to be very self-aware, unfortunately, linguistically. Like, this is what we do in class. I got a great grade in my class. Let me do that.
Be a little bit uncomfortable.
Be uncomfortable. That's what the class is all about too.
Yeah.
They have to be aware that being uncomfortable is gonna lead them to success.
Yes.
Some of my best students are the ones that really do not care how they look or how they sound. That they're just like pushing, making mistakes, and then being aware of their mistakes, and then like testing their abilities and testing their language. That is very useful.
Yeah.
And in the case of medical Spanish, you have to do that before you graduate from medical school.
Yeah.
Because the moment that you get into your residency, you have to be an advanced speaker that is super comfortable. Again, with mistakes here and there, but you're aware of those mistakes, and little by little, maybe you start improving on them, but you already have to be a solid advanced speaker by that point.
Because if you're not, bad things can happen.
Yes. Well, it has been, lately, the last 5 years, I learned something, it's a term, is language concordance.
Okay.
Between healthcare provider and patients. And that means that the provider needs to have the same proficiency level than the patient, because the outcomes of the treatment improve
Yes.
with that language concordance.
Yeah.
You know, I feel comfortable talking to my healthcare provider. She understands my issues. I was able to share all my concerns, my fears. She empathized with me. He or she is recommending this treatment, I'm gonna follow it.
Yeah.
My attitude will be very different if I feel that my healthcare provider, I had to simplify my language so that he or she would understand. The treatment that they provide, I'm like, well, I'm not so sure if I don't feel that same
maybe it's not right.
enthusiasm. Maybe there may be, maybe I simplified too much the information I presented.
Yep.
Symptoms, duration of symptoms, location, etc. So that's just at a very basic level. A little bit more advanced, you know, if maybe the recommendations do not fit my lifestyle that I get. No? So for instance, it's very easy for me to recommend, hey, you need to eat more fruits and vegetables. But what if I don't live nearby a supermarket that sells those products? So yeah, the recommendation is there.
Yeah.
But more information needed to be obtained from me in order to provide a better recommendation for a patient. Yeah. So we tend to think that medical Spanish is just vocabulary, but it's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
You know, you have to pay attention to your tone. You have to, instead of giving commands or for instructions, express more politeness. Be able to connect with the patient by sharing your personal experience, etc. So, yes, vocabulary is very important, but it's just the base. You have to go for more. Yeah.
Cover more. We were just talking about it in the previous interview of communication.
Yes.
The difference between speaking and communicating.
Yes.
How can students get to that next? What recommendations would you have to students to get to that next level of not just talking, but communicating, understanding, and getting into a language?
Yes, I see it. I see that a lot in my basic language classes, and sometimes also in the medical Spanish classes. That students are satisfied by just saying things to their classmates. For instance, I'm talking about in the classroom. Not something. Let's go for with something simple.
Yes.
In the classroom, I produce the question, and I think that I'm done.
Yeah.
And then my partner is replying. I am not even listening to my partner.
Yeah, because you've already done your part.
Yes. And you know, just something very easy at that basic level. You have to, even at that basic level, you have to start producing follow-up questions. That shows to your partner comprehension, and you're pushing the conversation forward. You're obtaining more details, etc. So at every level, you have to ask follow-up questions. That's super important. Repeating the information. You know, the person asks a question, the partner replies. It's very natural if people pay attention to what we do in English.
Yeah.
To repeat the information from the answer that you just obtained. That is, again, sending positive signals to your partner. Hey, I'm understanding you. Let's keep going.
I'm hearing you. I'm engaging with it. And now I want to continue the conversation forward.
Yes. And that happens from the get-go. From, hey, what's your name?
Yeah.
John. Hi, John. How are you? By me repeating that, I'm making feel you comfortable.
Yes.
Because you're understanding me. And then you continue improving your Spanish, and you continue with those strategies. No? And then you get to medical Spanish, and you continue with those strategies. And then you start seeing patients in Spanish, and you have to continue with those strategies. Yeah,
absolutely. Kind of a question that I have, and a lot of students have, is, especially here in the United States and in the west of the United States, a lot of students take very basic Spanish in high school or maybe a class in college,
Yes.
and they ask me, I took a couple classes in Spanish, can I put Spanish on my resume?
Yes.
And I have mixed feelings about that, and we can talk about that later, but how would you recommend students exemplify or show their language ability in Spanish outside of a resume? How do you show an employer, I am bilingual?
Oy. Well, they
In
have
your
to-
opinion.
if well, you can say something on paper,
Yeah.
but then it's a lot more useful to talk about the things that you have done already in that language. And for that, you have to look for opportunities.
You have to have those experiences.
Yeah, and again, they're not going to be smooth initially, and you have to accept that, and you have to continue with that. Like for instance, right now there's a student organization that is a community health involvement project. They organize a health fair with the School of Pharmacy at a school nearby, and they need Spanish speakers. So I invited my students in my class. I invited the students for another class that we teach here at USC, the one that I teach at Keck, to participate in the fair.
Yeah.
Once they go there, yes, again, the initial interactions to help checking people, get their names, where they're from, bioinformation, etc., to play with kids who are here and need to be entertained for a little while the parents are going through the stations in the fair. If you go there and do that in Spanish, that is gonna skyrocket you in your resume too. Like, so you can say, I speak Spanish, I participated at the health fair,
Yeah.
this and this, or you can talk to the person if you're being interviewed already.
Yeah.
For instance, I speak Spanish in a healthcare setting. For instance, this semester I did this and this at a health fair. It's good for the CV, but it's also very good as a personal.
For the speaker, yeah, for
yes,
the,
for the
yeah,
person.
to be immersed in that environment, yeah.
It's again, in class we try to do that.
Yeah.
But it's still a
can't be the
control.
same.
It's not the same. Everybody in the class tries to be nice to each other, positive to each other. We try to make things easier for each other. But then when you go out there and it's for real, it's a little bit more messy.
Yeah. So I assume, and in my experiences, it's uncomfortable not being proficient in a setting. It's scary if you're a non-native Spanish speaker going into these fairs or into these medical situations where you're kind of stretching yourself. And a lot of students and a lot of people can feel almost that quote-unquote imposter syndrome. What recommendations would you have to get over imposter syndrome or get past the growing pains of stretching?
Well, this, at least for me, it requires to be self-aware a little bit.
Okay.
In this process of learning, of working on your Spanish in the healthcare setting, a lot of times you're going to be on your own.
Yeah.
And that's where this imposter syndrome may come. We try, or I try, but a lot of times it depends on the students. They have to be self-aware of their learning process.
Yeah.
They have to evaluate the things that they are doing in Spanish to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And my hope, the hope that I have for the students is that at some point in time, in the future, they're not going to worry about their Spanish when they're going to go see a patient. That they're not even going to think about it. And hopefully that is early in their careers.
Yeah.
That would be, at least from my experience, it has to start hitting them around third year of medical school.
Yeah.
When they're starting to do rotations and they're starting to see patients under the supervision of doctors and preceptors, it's about that point in time when they have to stop thinking about their Spanish.
And just go.
And they're just going.
Yeah.
Another thing that they have that I also promote a lot in my classes is that every interaction you start with easy stuff and then you go
Okay.
to more complicated stuff.
Okay.
So again, that goes from basic Spanish from day one until you start seeing patients. You don't go and see somebody and get into the issue right away.
Yeah.
You greet them, you start building, you start checking the channel to see if there's communication, you start creating connection, and then you get to the difficult part.
Yeah.
So yeah, those little by little,
Yeah.
you know, you have to get used to it, and it all depends a lot on you. Like
Yeah.
you have to be self-aware, you have to evaluate yourself, and then you have to continue pushing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great advice, whether we're talking about languages or just kind of life or careers.
Yes. Yeah, that definitely applies for everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is all of the questions that I had for you, but I want to open it up to the people in the room who are our audience today. If you have any questions for kind of this topic, please raise your hand, ask a question, so we can answer your questions. That's why we do Ask John, so we can answer your questions. Yes.
Question. So, I'm wondering, Professor, do you know that knowing a foreign language, for Spanish, your class will help them for the medical school application?
Oh yes, definitely, and yes, showing that and especially if you can show that you have done activities in Spanish, that would be very helpful in their applications. But not only that, like at programs like, for instance, like at KEC here in Los Angeles, and at other healthcare medical programs and other healthcare related programs, a lot of interaction, a big component of the education in these programs is you practicing with patients. And if there's the possibility of interacting with patients in Spanish or in Chinese or in Korean, and you can tell the program that you're applying that you already have had this experience volunteering at a health fair, for instance, in any of these languages. Here in LA we have so many, Armenian, for instance, also, that you have already had the experience. That's gonna be something important to at the moment that you're being selected to be admitted to one of these programs. So yes, showing that you have the ability to speak the language and that you have had already experiences speaking the language outside of the classroom, completing tasks, will be very helpful. Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, David. Thank you for the great stories. I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about the stories developing the medical textbooks, the program, the pilot program? Because I assume that there's no medical textbook that was available when you start teaching the program, or if there's no, or if there is one, or if there's no. So how do you develop the textbook, and how do you engage with the students?
Well, in all the classes that I have taught, it was a work that I did with medical students like 20 years ago. They analyzed what they were doing in their English classrooms, in their English classes in medicine. They're going through health systems, etc. And they told me, we need you to go over these topics. And then we started to put together the vocabulary, the questions, some of the answers, and we came up with a set of study guides. And those are the ones that I have been using all these years, with modifications, of course. And my point of view has changed too. Initially, the study guides was the objective. You know, as long as you can produce these, you're good. Now my point of view has changed. Those study guides are only an introduction to the things that you need to do with the patients in each one of these particular topics. You know, for instance, like the social history of the patient, for instance, how is your diet? See, that was like one of the original questions that we had, no? And then the patient would reply, or in our practices, the patient will reply, no, I have a very good diet, I eat fruits, blah, blah, blah. No? I'm like, you cannot stop there. That question is just, you're introducing the topic of diet to the conversation. You have to go further. You have to ask, hey, what did you have for lunch earlier today? And that answer is going to be more specific, is going to be more real. You're going to obtain better data from your patient with that question. So yes, I have not used a textbook ever. It's just the study guides as the jumping point. And then hopefully with the students' experience, they start asking questions and we start building more content related to those topics. So yes, in general, a lot of text, or the majority of the text or the tools, emphasize the learning of vocabulary and maybe some sentence structures. But again, that's at the lower level. If the students can control the material right away, they have to start thinking about more. Like, how do I use this, not only to obtain information, but to share something about myself with the patient so that the patient feels more comfortable with me? How can I use this material to empathize with to show empathy with the patient regarding the treatment, etc. So that's a big that's a big another step in the development process. So yeah. If a textbook shows that or helps you to develop those abilities, then that's the kind of textbook that you need. I also think that it's very difficult to achieve an advanced proficiency language just with medical Spanish. You need a minor, you need a major in Spanish, you need a study abroad experience in order to put you in that, at the level of the advanced level that we need. And the same would apply to any language. Yeah, so that's my point of view. And there's other things that you could do. You can always have like a lower proficiency level in the language to try to connect with the person that you're talking to, and then introduce the person who's going to assist you to do the heavy lifting in Spanish or in Chinese. But it's always helpful to have a good level or a good enough level to have the basic connection with the patient, and then the healthcare part bring the assistance of another professional. So yeah. Anyway, different things to do. But in general, no, any textbook can help as long as you are aware that you need to do more than what is in the textbook. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from our live audience?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please do.
Professor, I'm wondering that students do like kind of role play in classrooms. Do they have the opportunity to have like real life application, like observing in the clinic or hospital, or do they have the opportunity to have a field trip to hospital? I'm just wondering.
We're fortunate enough. Well, at least with Spanish and Chinese here in Los Angeles, there's a lot of variety of opportunities. Like for instance, right now for this class that I'm teaching with students in the global medicine program, there's another professor in the Spanish minor and major, Professor Consuelo Sigüenza Ortiz, who's teaching a class for students studying Spanish, minor or major in Spanish. She is having her students volunteer. They need to volunteer at something where they're using their Spanish. So 2 of them are helping me in my class.
Nice.
And my class, the students in my class are very good, very proficient.
Yeah.
So these 2 students coming to my class, they're getting the experience of they have to use their Spanish
In a different environment,
in a very different setting, trying to help other students, having role plays, lead students in Spanish who want to improve their Spanish. That gives a lot of abilities. Some of her students, I'm also helping them volunteer with the medical students, with the medicine program, volunteer as patients, standardized patients, and they're having practice sessions with the medicine students. Again, they're leading, try to picture these, undergrads leading grad students, trying to improve. And we provide them the tool, we give them some training, and then they go. So there's a lot of opportunities there. You can shadow, you can rotate in clinics nearby here in LA, and you can use Spanish out there. Also, something that we don't do in our basic language classes, but in this class that I'm teaching, since oral communication is a big component of the class, I have standardized patients have to be interviewed by the students for midterms and for final interview. So there's another thing that is very helpful, that even though my students are very good and I can have almost any conversation with them in Spanish, that thing of talking to somebody that they do not know about a topic that they are just starting to practice. They mentioned that they were very nervous. They were very stressed during the interaction. I'm like, but why? Like I could talk to you about all these topics. You have done this in class. You can talk for minutes on it. But it's different. The interaction is different. So students somehow have to find those opportunities. And there's a lot. There's a lot in LA that we can do. At least in Spanish, Chinese, also in Armenian, in Korean, there's a lot of opportunities, but students have to look for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions from the audience? Yes.
So for students who are looking to gain experience in a foreign language, what kind of skills should they be looking to develop, and how is it different from developing skills in a foreign language in a more informal setting?
Well, just like we were talking about earlier, in my basic Spanish classes, we have to cover as many things as possible. We do written comprehension, writing compositions, etc., because we don't know what you're gonna need, and the students don't know either what they're gonna need. We have to prepare them for anything. But then as soon as you go out there and have a little bit of professional or volunteering experience, you become aware of what the needs are. So you are like, well, you know what? I need to obtain enough information to check this patient that is coming into the clinic. I need to ask their name, how old they are, etc. So as soon as you have a little bit of volunteering information, you have to be, I need that. See, so from my classroom experience, you have pretty much on your own to start transferring. See, you know what? From your basic Spanish class, you have to be like, look at this, all this stuff that we're doing in class, I can apply it this way. But the only way that you can do the transfer is if you already have some professional or volunteering experience that makes you aware of what your needs are. And those are going to be your needs for that particular moment. The moment that you have a different position, volunteering or paid, you're going to become aware that, I need something else, I need more, and then you continue pushing. So yeah, you have to push yourself. You have to put yourself in those practical situations to become aware of what your needs are. Unfortunately, our needs limit our development. We are only as good as our needs. You need to somehow, if you want to continue developing, you need to continue looking for new needs. Like, now I want to read short stories in Spanish. Now I want to watch National Geographic in Spanish. Now, etc. Fiction, movies, etc. You have to put yourself out there in order to continue having more difficult needs or different needs than what you already have, so that your Spanish or your any other language continues improving.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We want to thank you, David, for joining us here on Ask John. We're sadly coming to the end of our time, and that means I have two final questions for you. Do you have any final words of wisdom to impart to our live audience and our audience listening online?
Definitely, you need to consume media in the other language that you are learning.
Okay.
If you are not, again, you are staying at the same level that you have.
You can't grow.
You cannot grow. Yeah. The moment you consume in the other language, any type of text, movies, TV shows, radio, etc., you are going to maintain or improve. And at the same time, what I mentioned earlier, you cannot, if what you're watching, what you're reading is not generating a picture in your head, it's not helping you improve. You need to grasp a little bit of the meaning that is being conveyed to you in order for the material to be helpful to you. So that will be the big thing, that you have to continue pushing yourself outside of the classroom. Yeah,
absolutely. And that brings me to my last question, whether it's certain classes or just other things. Is there anything in particular you would like to plug?
Well, as I was mentioning, definitely that if you want to improve your interactions in the future in a medical setting, you need to look for solid experiences in Spanish and in any other language. But like a major in Spanish, it is very useful. It's necessary. And a study abroad experience will be very helpful. Anything that can take you little by little to that level that you need. And if you want to practice medicine, that level will be the advanced level. And I mean, again, it's you have to be very self-aware. Like, for instance, this literature class, very interesting. I'm getting a great grade in it. I love it. But I want to practice medicine in the future. I want to go medical school. Okay, how can I use that for that? So I don't know. In my class, I have to give a presentation on an analysis of a paper. I have to convince my classmates to think the same way that I think. My classmates are going to have difficult questions about what I'm presenting. I have to answer them. Okay, I have to transfer those abilities to a healthcare setting. And it's difficult to have that experience in a controlled setting outside of class. So it's a lot easier to do that in class, and then you transfer it outside.
Absolutely.
So yes, get a minor, a major in Spanish. Do study abroad. Look for opportunities. We have the Spanish Undergraduate Student Association. It's a student organization here. We have mesas de conversación. Come to those and have interactions in Spanish that are not related to class. So those are the type of experiences that I would recommend. Yeah.
Thank you so much again, David, for joining us here on Ask John.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
for our
John,
live
the
audience,
invitation.
and thank you for the audience online. Thank you for joining us. Fight on.